Today we're going to look at alignment. Now, I'm sure this is something that you've focused on in the past many times and you're probably always conscious of, and you find yourself slipping into habits. I aim too far right or aim too far left. My mates tell me I'm always aiming right, yet when I aim left it feels so strange and I feel like I'm going to swing offline, and it kind of just throws everything into chaos. Well, you've probably been training with one of these and putting it on the floor and using it for your feet and then checking the shoulders. But even this doesn't seem to help. So that when you go on the range, yes, everything might be fine, but you go on the golf course and you fall into the same old habits. Well, let's think about how the body normally targets itself, because what we're talking about is targeting. That leads us on to the golf school at West Herts. So important to accessing the golfer that you're capable of being, and this is a unique opportunity for me with GRF Golf to collaborate with Carl at West Herts. Be on the course, we're going to be on the range. It's going to be a real deep dive into your game. Don't miss it, guys, and we look forward to seeing you very soon at West Herts. And we orientate ourselves in life naturally every day without even thinking about it. Why is it such a problem in golf? Well, this can present the issue because of the dynamics of it. Because three-dimensionally it's not really pointing where we think it is, because the loft on the face points in a different direction to how we associate the leading edge. So everybody squares the club face up using the leading edge, and I'm not saying that's wrong, by the way, but gripping this tight, almost trying to control it visually, is actually disconnecting us from our intended target. Think about where we look when we're moving and how the body naturally orientates itself to move in that direction. So if I want to walk forward, I look at you and my feet travel this way. If I want to throw a ball, I'm looking at you guys and I'm going to move myself relative to the intended target. So the body orientates itself with the intention of the movement. So it's not just alignment to a target, everything square, now I can throw it in the direction I intend. The body moves to organise itself naturally in the moment, so it's an improvisation, but it's based around a very specific target, and the body's moving around to facilitate the motion that results in that release in the intended direction. Now, in golf, we're stood at the side of the golf ball. So not like throwing, where we're releasing the ball very much close to our eye line, or like darts, we're stood at the side of the golf ball. So this presents parallax, this presents issues in terms of distortion, but the body is already hardwired for this. What we've got to do is just trust it. So we need to give it as much information from the field of view here to allow the body to subconsciously organise itself, but us consciously recognise how it is orientating itself. So it's a self-organisation that we've just got to recognise is taking place. Now we can assist ourselves, of course. We can start to recognise if we're doing things that are taking us off track. Now, there's a few little things we can do, and we can pick up on the guys and ladies on the TV, the tour players. You'll see how they organise themselves to a golf ball. Well, you'll notice that it starts with looking at the target and placing the club head. And then they address the golf ball in terms of taking their stance with their feet. But what they're doing is they're referencing themselves to the target with their upper body whilst they're looking at the target. So their upper torso is now, if you like, calibrating to the target, and then the stance takes place, and then there's a sense of everything being aligned relative to everything else. Every segment of the body is orientating itself relative to every other part of the system, and as a whole we have a sense of direction. It's really joint alignment. So feet can play a very, very kind of disruptive role. For example, if I can stand with my toes square to the target, so you can see now, guys, my toes are square. But if I open up my lead foot, suddenly it now looks left. So if I stand with a flared lead foot, what I might tend to do is actually, now I'm squared up, but I've got a lead foot that's flared and my toes are now square, but if I squared this foot up, so both feet are now neutral, I'm actually offset to the right. So my pelvis is actually slightly out of alignment. And what we can see is my pelvis is slightly out of alignment now, slightly to the right. So it's not actually the toes we're using, it's the ankles, the knees, the hips, the spine, rib cage. Yes, the shoulders can provide some sense of reference, but this can be very, very disruptive, disorientating to the body. And we can spend so much time looking down here that we're actually losing connection. We're becoming dissonant from our actual target in terms of orientation. And that's how the body likes to orientate itself. That's why putting, whilst looking at the hole, works. Because we can get a sense of where we are in time and space, orientationally, and allow that to happen through trial and error. So where is our 0, 0 coordinate? How are we referencing ourselves? Well, it all depends what shot you're going to play. Because the golf ball, for a draw, as a right-hander, needs to start right of target. So are we aligning ourselves to the target, or are we aligning ourselves to our intended start line? So it's important to pick a start line, and that's something you'll always hear the caddies talking to the players about. When you're watching golf on television, you'll hear the conversation between the caddy and the player, and they'll be talking about start line and maybe where the ball's going to finish. So there's already an intention of the shot shape, and that's going to influence how they align the club face. So we're aligning club face to start line, and then the golf swing is going to be relative to the start line. If we're going to play a draw, we need to be swinging to the right of that start line. So the club face is going to rotate, i.e. close in the downswing, so it squares to the intended start line, but the direction the club head's travelling that's going to influence the spin. So the club's going to be travelling for a draw to the right of where the club face is going to be pointing. So this is going to influence how you set up. It's not quite as simple as just setting up square to a target. And that's what so many people do. So let's have a look at how we can switch these sensors on, because this is sensory based, guys, and vision being a big part of it, and feel. We've got to feel this thing. So first of all, what I suggest you do is, can you feel the club head? Now that may seem a strange question, but what I want you to do is take it with your dominant hand to start with, look at the golf club and just twirl it. And can you return it back to where it started? And of course you can, because you're using your eyes. But can you do this now with your eyes closed? So close your eyes, twirl it around. I want you to lose sense of where it is. And now can you find where vertical is with a leading edge? I'm not cheating, guys. I've got my eyes closed because I want to test myself. Can I feel where this club's balanced in the vertical axis? I'm a bit closed. That to me felt square, and it's a bit closed. I tend to play with quite a strong draw, and my bad shot, of course, then is a hook or a block. So I'm going to go again. So I'm going to face you guys, and can I now lose that feeling? Can I find where that face is? And I've overcompensated. Now that often happens on a golf course, doesn't it? For the hook, what do? You overcompensate. You may even compensate with your alignment, because this is alignment. It's much more dynamic than we think. So now I'm going to go again, and what I've got to do is I've got to go until I feel closed again, you see. Well, I'm going to keep working on this, guys, until I get it better like that. Okay? I'm going to keep working and working. Just at home you can be doing this. Now what is it like with the non-dominant? and I'm way out, straight away. Ooh, I've lost this. I can't feel this. Open, close, decent. Pretty much center point. So this is like a dial, and you're starting to calibrate. So we can start to attune ourselves with both sides of the body, both hands, dominant and non-dominant, to recognize how the club feels when it's what we perceive to be balanced and leading edge square. Now we're going to take this a stage further, okay? Because everything revolves around the orientation of the club face relative to the start line, and then we can start to move our body relative to how we intend to swing, the intention of the swing. So now this is organised much more functionally relative to my grip, the orientation of my wrists, because that's essentially what the grip's doing. It's orientating the wrists. So it gives us mobility with the club. But we're not going to go into grip today. We're just looking at how we target. We're just targeting every aspect of the body. And this is quite intuitive. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take something to give us some feedback of where the club's pointing. Now I'm going to use a lie tool, but what I suggest you do is get a big T-peg and get some double-sided tape, or just something to stick it onto the face with, like blue tack or something, and just stick it in the middle of the face. And what I want you to do is place it on the floor, and I want you to look out there, and I want you to pick a target, and I want you to feel, without looking down now, where that club face is pointed. And I'm going to go for, out here I'm going to go for the 200. It's slightly right of the 150. And now I'm going to look down. I'm going to see where that's pointing. Okay. Now this is really tricky to see from here. So you're probably going to need somebody stood behind. So get a friend just to help you, stand behind and give you an indication of where this is pointing. They can even come in, step in, hold the club there while you go back and have a look where it's pointing. So you can now visually affirm what you're feeling. So in your mind you can start mapping this, because we're going to calibrate to this field of view. This being part of the body, and it's a part we've got to get really comfortable with. So change target, and then feel where that sweet spot's pointing, and feel what it's like with shaft lean. Can you lean the shaft forward now and orientate it? And then check. And yeah, I think that's pretty decent. Now, what is it like to place both hands on and then take our stance relative to that start line? And then where would I need to stand for a draw or a fade? Maybe I need to stand more to the right. But I've already now set myself relative to this club face. So I've got some form of reference that I can kind of trust, because I've had this feedback to affirm it. I suggest you do this with both hands. So not just, I'm using my trail, which is my dominant. Okay, as a right hand, I'm using my right hand. So I swing right-handed, and the right hand is my dominant hand. But I'm going to go left. What's it like to target with the left? Now, for you guys who tend to be miles out with your upper body alignment, i.e. shoulders, they might be miles to the right, pointing so far right of target that you just can't swing anywhere close to where you intend. Or you might stand open. If you stand open, the intended target is going to be so far in front of your lead shoulder. This space is going to be huge. Conversely, if you're aiming miles to the right, that target's going to be miles behind that lead shoulder. So if you take the club with your lead hand, target first by looking where you're going. Let the club face organise itself. Feel the shaft lean too, because that's going to influence now where this club face is pointing. and just rotate, grip it really light and just rotate the club and feel the sweet spot. It's the centre of percussion of the club face that we need to point in the direction of play. So using that sweet spot, feeling that sweet spot, point where we want to go. Notice now I'm using my left shoulder in order to address what will be the golf ball. I'm having to align my shoulders. So the intended target, if you like, for the start line relative to that club face now will be in front of the shoulder. So if I'm pointing out to the right here, to this tree out to the right, I'm going to move around and that tree now is in front of my lead shoulder. And if I now bring in my trail hand and then take my stance relative to my upper body, I know that I'm stood, if you like, square to that sweet spot, to that club face, which is pointing at that target. But that's my start line. So I might need to move around now for a draw or a fade. So if I change my target now and I'm going to go straight ahead, I'm going to get comfortable with lead arm, bringing the trail hand. I've already lined the club face up, looking at my target, my intended start line. Then I bring the trail hand in. I'm comfortable with where this target is, and now I can bring the trail hand in, and now I can take my stance with my feet whilst looking at the target. So now looking down, you get a visual affirmation of where you are, and then move around. So you're feeling now how you're adjusting, adapting the positioning of the body relative to the intention of the swing to facilitate that motion. So it's all based around how you intend to move. Test yourself with your trail hand. Now you'll find a lot of golfers who are trail eye dominant, so right eye dominant as a right-hander, probably need to rotate a lot more to allow the dominant eye to see more of the field of view. And then as we go into the golf shot now and take our stance, just be mindful now of the orientation of the upper body. Because quite often we can be stood laterally flexed to the right, standing open, and this can affect now the dynamics of the backswing. So we've got to address the golf ball in a way that is going to enable us to use our full movement capability. We don't want to be compromising ourselves from the start. So the best checkpoint that I'd recommend is lead arm. Lead arm, target, looking forward, lead arm, gives you a sense of the upper torso orientation, bring in the trail hand now underneath, and now looking down, orientating the lower body. And we've got a starting point. We've now got an alignment, we've got a 0-0 coordinate for our start line, and we can move around now. And moving around enables us to adjust the positioning to just let the swing go with minimal disruption. So how do we do this? So to move around the golf ball, what we're going to do, we're going to use some spray, we're going to imagine a circle. Now, it's not the best circle in the world, but imagine that we are stood on the edge of a wheel. We're stood. So just imagine that we are stood on the rim of a wheel. The golf club is the spoke and the ball is the centre. of the wheel. So in order to aim to the right, instead of just rotating to the right, because that will just shift the golf ball to the left relative to the torso. So now this is going to possibly introduce issues in terms of getting a strike, moving the low point forward, because just by rotating to the right and not adjusting left or right, I've shifted the ball position forward. Conversely, by aiming to the left, the ball moves back in the stance relative to the torso. So this can change angle of attack, it can change intended path, because the more we swing down, the more the path goes out to the right, the more we swing up, the more the path's travelling to the left, the more we swing down to the right. So this can introduce unrecognisable chaos. So simple, think of the wheel. The ball is the centre of the wheel and we move around the wheel. So to move to the right, I'm going to move around to the left on the wheel. So the ball now maintains its position relative to me. It's always in the same place. So I could set up with the golf ball more towards my left heel, more towards, I like to use the upper torso as a reference, more towards my left shoulder. So I know that's forward in my stance, but generally this will happen just by you looking forward and imagining the golf shot. The ball position organises itself, but just for affirmation, you can use your body as a reference, just so that you're confident you've got it in a place you intend to. So moving around this wheel as a system. Notice I've got my lead arm on the club as I'm doing it. Everything's moving as a system. And when we look at the target, we can feel the club face because we've trained ourselves. So the proof's in the pudding. And this is why playing shapes and varying your practice is really important for improving your alignment. When you've got some structure to it, you've got a process that you can follow, and it's all based around the intention visually and an internalization of how this feels spatially relative to what we're seeing. So we're attuning feelings to the images. So I'm going to go through the process where I'm going in with the lead hand, aligning the club face on the target. I can feel the club face, lead up with the lead arm. I'm going to bring in the trail hand. Now I'm going to bring my stance in. So I'm aligned to that start line, and now I'm going to move around a little bit more with the body, and I can feel how I'm adjusting and how this is enabling me to create that swing shape for the draw. And there it is. A strong one. Started out to the right, drew back into the centre, strong flight, 3/4 swing. So I'm focusing more on just the feeling of the direction of the swing relative to the club face. And I'm doing it from the beginning, with the setup, and using a process I can apply time and time again through a routine. Standing back here, moving in there, lead arm, feel the club face, pointing on the start line. I can feel some shaft lean here. I can feel my hand forward of the club head. I can sense that sweet spot. Now I'm going to go for the fade. So I'm going to go to the left. I'm going to start more towards the bush on the left. Feel this. Now the bush is over here. That's my start line. I can sense where the club face is. I can sense where I am relative to the start line, to the club face, to me, to my torso. Now I'm going to bring in the trail hand. Now I'm going to move around the wheel. Now I'm in a real place for a, I'm in a really good place for a fade. And there's a fade. Quite a big one. I set up for quite a big fade there. Big swing to the left. Okay. It's only a 3/4 swing. Just playing little half, 3/4 shots, but I'm playing with shot shape. I'm just working alignment. Now I've got a sense of where right is. Now I've got a sense of where left is. We can go into the middle. And we can play around with this. It's like a compass that we're attuning ourselves to. And this is just the start of how we calibrate ourselves to the target, to the ball flight we intend to play, and make life as easy as possible to move freely here, with intention, without compromising ourselves. And these are the critical fundamentals. It's the foundation of how we align to the golf ball.